Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Tyler from the Keep Pounding podcast. I am back. I've been on a little month hiatus. Moved. It's been a crazy time off season though. But the reason why it's been so long is I just moved recently. We finally got everything moved in. Pretty much we're done. There's a little things I need to do, but overall, finally done with everything. So I work three different jobs. I literally work every single day. I have three little kids, and so on top of that, moving into a new house, getting that ready. So little to pretty much no time being able to do content for you guys. So now that I've kind of moved in, now I can spend my some of my free time doing this. So for those of you guys that watch my channel when I would upload a video once a week, sorry for the long wait, but I'm glad to be back. And we've missed quite a bit of stuff. I'm going to do a very quick snapshot of like what I've missed, like the little things throughout since I've been gone. But then we'll kind of jump into training camp. So I'll kind of go over today like the biggest position battles heading to training camp, players with the most approved, rookies who I think will push for immediate playing time. We already know one that's going to, and then some potential breakout candidates on offense and defense. And then I'm going to kind of give a little bit. I'm not going to go really dive into it too much, but a little bit of the early 53-man roster predictions and which camp battles will have the biggest impact on this season. And this has been a crazy, crazy time since training camp. It's been interesting today. The last couple of days have not really gone the way we wanted them to. Now, doesn't mean the season's over, not by any stretch of the imagination, but this isn't the best start that Panthers and us fans were hoping for. So let's jump right into it. All right. So first and foremost, I want to shout out to Chris Johnson. So if you guys haven't heard, which you probably have, but it's been since I've been on that I haven't been able to go over this, but the former NFL running back went on Good Morning America and announced that he has ALS. So he's only 39, same age as me, and this disease was a complete shock from what, according to him. There's no history of ALS in his family. Doctors believe it was what's called sporadic ALS, which accounts for majority of the cases. He said his first symptom was the weakness in the right hand, and him and his wife both thought it was like wear and tear from his NFL career. But for people that don't know, ALS is a progressive neurological disease that basically attacks the nerve cells that control the muscles, and that's where over time it can take away a person's ability to move, speak, swallow, breathe. And unfortunately, there's no cure, only medication that you can take to help slow the progression down. So obviously, Chris Johnson went on Good Morning America and talked about chose the fight. He is with one of the nation's leading ALS specialists, but unfortunately, the disease has progressed pretty rapidly. Last year, he was being able to hold his daughter, play with her, and now he can't. And he relies specifically on a speech generating device that uses his recording of his own voice. So I just want to give my thoughts and prayers to Chris Johnson and his family. This is a really sad situation and story that I came across, and just wanted to shout out and talk about Chris Johnson, and wanted to be able to give my thoughts and prayers to him and his family. So with that being said, so a couple of things. So the first thing I want to talk about is Will Grier retiring, right? So obviously any real Panther fan knows that he had no shot whatsoever to make the QB2 position. I was honestly confused when he retired because I believe there were reports, but I've also heard conflicting reports too, where the first thing I heard was he actually turned down a coaching position to play for the Panthers. Then he retired. But then I've also heard that there was a possibility that Dallas Cowboys were thinking about offering him a coaching position. So I don't know. But either way, this doesn't really impact our team at all. He was more of a, depth roster, practice squad guy, someone that can throw the football during training camp, and that was it. He had no real shot whatsoever making QB2. I don't even know if he really thought he had a shot, but if he did for some reason and he retired because of that, then I don't know. So again, doesn't really affect us at all. But just want to talk about that real quick. One of the big things I thought that was really important, and I honestly thought that was going to be something that we were going to do, was re-sign Brady Christensen, which is significant, which we'll kind of talk about. One of the other reasons why they re-signed him so quickly is for other reasons that we all know about. So Brady, he can play. The reason why this is really important is it provides offensive line depth. We didn't really have offensive line depth. You have Chandler Zavala, you have Jatir Carter, guys that really don't want to be our depth pieces. I feel like we can improve with that, and Brady Christensen does that for us. So he can play all 5 positions. Unfortunately, last year, I thought up until his injury in Week 8, where it was against Buffalo, where he tore his Achilles, he had one of his better career seasons. He played really solid. I thought whenever he took over Rob Hunt's injury, he played. There wasn't a huge drop off, or no drop off at all. I thought he played really, really well. So he signed a 1-year, $2.787 fully guaranteed contract, which I feel like is a win-win for both sides. But this is something that I felt like was long overdue. It made sense for us to do that, both for him and for us. So glad that happened, and definitely makes me feel better about the offensive line depth position, given what we'll talk about in a little bit. One thing I did want to go over, so we have Fan Fest. The Panthers announced Fan Fest July 31st. It's $5 a ticket. The money generated there will go to the Panther charities. The event will start at 5, where the gates will open and team stores will open, and then they'll have some entertainment and games around 5:30, and then the players will eventually make their way on the field for warm-ups an hour from then at 6:30, and then practice starts at 7:30 up until 8:45, where after practice they'll have some autograph sessions, they'll have some fireworks, a laser show. So if you guys haven't been to Fan Fest, it is a lot of fun. It's been years since I've been to one. Years. They actually, when I went, they had like a 5K for charity, and after the 5K, then you can get in the stadium, and FanFest was that's when they had FanFest. So I'm not sure if they're doing that or not, but they are having FanFest July 31st, $5 a ticket. Should be a lot of fun if you guys want to check out the team. Be cool to see. So now, one of the things that I haven't gone over that a lot of Panther fans on Twitter were talking about was this guy, Sam Laporta. So there's a lot of talk, trade talk surrounding him. So Adam Schefter did report that the Lions really want to get a deal done, but this would be, to be honest, an intriguing pickup if we end up getting Laporta. The tight end room is, let's all be honest, it's kind of mid, probably a little bit below mid as far as production, but I just don't know how much of that is scheme versus talent. I do think it's kind of both, and we'll talk about the tight ends a little bit. But obviously this guy, it would be a significant upgrade if we could acquire him. So, but what would it take to trade for him? Dan Morgan likes his draft picks. He's not giving up top picks. There could be a day 3 pick in a player, possibly, but I think the Lions would want more than that. And plus, you got to pay him. So, given what it would require to get him, and then how much they would have to pay him, which I believe would be around 10 to 15 million a year. But again, this guy last year he did have surgery on his lower back. He had a discectomy in his lower back, but he PFF wise ranks second overall as far as tight ends, overall PFF grade. He had no drops. Again, he had that surgery last year, so he only played about half the games, 9 games last year. Yeah, he's 5th in yards per reception, first in the NFL when it comes to drops. He had 0 last year. He had just under 500 yards receiving, a few touchdowns, and this guy's a really good run blocker. He's a red zone threat, and he's still young. He's 25. Obviously, the Lions don't want to trade an all-pro caliber tight end, but Jahmyr Gibbs, they have that they still will probably provide a contract extension to. They have Brian Branch, their defensive back, that is due for an extension. So you can't pay everybody, but I just don't see this as a possibility. Would this be fun and great? Yes, but I just don't think, given the tight end target percentage, I just don't see us acquiring someone like that. Now, he would obviously make our offense better, but I just don't see that happening. But it would be intriguing and fun to if that did happen. Now, another thing that happened was Jalen Coker and signed an extension, and this is something that I've been thinking that the Panthers would do. I thought they were going to do a little bit earlier, but I'm glad they got it done before training camp and before the season. So Coker, he signed a 3-year deal with I think it's up to $41 million guaranteed. He had a just under $20 million signing bonus, but average per year is pretty much 11.6 million, which is a steal. This guy is an up and coming star. Now, last year, how he played, I really thought he should have been given wide receiver 2 a lot earlier than he did, before the Rams wildcard game. But he gave us a sneak peek of what it can be like, what the Panthers offense can be like with him as wide receiver 2 and then T-Mac at wide receiver 1. We saw, they couldn't guard him, and I understand the Rams cornerbacks were not that great, and that's why they went out and got one of the top free agent cornerbacks this offseason. They drafted a top corner as well, but this is much deserved. The Panthers are smart signing him now before he gets even more expensive. So tomorrow's price isn't yesterday's price. So this is a smart decision. I'm happy for him. He deserves it. And I'm excited to see what he can do moving forward. Hopefully he can stay healthy. The last several years he's been out for 2 to 4 games, but having Jalen Coker at wide receiver 2 makes us a lot better. So I was really happy to see this, and I'm excited to see him continue to grow as a player. But congratulations to Jalen Coker. And then also we got Bryce Young, the NFL Top 100, where the players vote for the top 100 guys, and Bryce Young was number 98. And I feel like this is just something where other players outside of the Panthers obviously see him as an up-and-coming player. Now, he still has a lot to prove, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He still has a lot to prove, but he has made steps every year to improve and get better. But he's always been great at clutching and finishing games in the fourth quarter. So with him, it's all about just consistency. But I thought this was great to see Bryce Young in the top 100. So it's just cool to see other players see the talent that a lot of true Panther fans see. So hopefully, he kind of gets a bad rap with NFL analysts, ESPN analysts, and all that. But I did feel like this was something that he deserved. Now, one thing that kind of had me question was Derek Brown at 90. And we're going to go over a few other players here in a bit, but Derek Brown at 90 I thought was a little too high. I thought he should be a lot lower as far as his ranking. I thought he should be honestly, 60s. I was surprised to see him at 90, but there's I saw a report where there's an NFL executive or a scout or a coach or something that said, but they were actively running plays away from him. That's how good Derek Brown is. The only reason he's not a household name is that he plays for Carolina, and it's true. Once we started winning, which we won the division last year, you're starting to see some recognition through players, right? And even a little bit of with social media and ESPN and other analysts around other outlets. When we start winning, that's when we're going to start, when players will start to get the true recognition. So I think 90, it's great that he was in the top 100. I think the year before he wasn't, but I think he deserves to be a little bit lower than that. But what I was excited to see is T-Mac at 87. So offensive rookie of the year makes sense. I think the sky is the limit for this guy. I'm really excited to see what he can do going forward this season. I've heard reports of him maybe going in the slot a little bit more. Last year it was roughly around 15% in the slot. And then I've heard reports that they might increase that to 30%. But with T-Mac, Jalen Coker, XL, Chris Brazzell, we'll talk about them in a little bit as far as outside of wide receiver 1 and 2. There's a lot of versatility and a lot of ways that they can change things to affect the defense. So, shout out to T Mac. I think he's going to be one of the top receivers. This is a year where, hey, if you can get like 1,500, 1,200, 1,300, 1,500 yards, he's going to be, you know, league wide known as like a top 5-7 wide receiver. So really happy to have him on our team. But T Mac at 87, and then obviously JC Horn. I don't really think you'll see anybody else outside of the JC Horn. I would rank, if I was going to rank all these, it would be Bryce Young, T Mac, JC Horn, and Derek Brown as far as like my opinion as far as best player. But JC Horn, first player since Brian Burns to make back-to-back Pro Bowls. When he's on the field, he's a beast, dude. He's top 5 easy cornerback in the league. I still feel like people don't give him the recognition that he deserves, and I think maybe a part of that is injuries. But this guy is a beast. So happy to have him on the team. But it was cool to see that we got 4 players on the top 100, and we all know the last several seasons we haven't really had that. So shout out to Bryce Young, DB, T Mac, and JC Horn. All right, so the 21st, a few days ago, the rookies reported to training camp, and then the veterans reported the other day. So camp is going to last about 6 weeks up into the preseason, where we're going to have our first game, which is the Hall of Fame game, which does not count towards the preseason, where we're going to play Arizona August 6th. And then we're going to do joint practice with the Jacksonville Jaguars up until our first preseason game with them, which I believe will be at Jacksonville. And then after preseason week 1 against Jacksonville, we'll have a joint practice with the Houston Texans and Charlotte. I want to take a peek, and which we'll talk about a little bit later, but we're going to take a peek at each position group and talk about each group and how each group looks going into camp. So we got training camp 4 weeks, and then we got some joint practices. And I want to kind of get into, before we get into training camp, I want to kind of go over some news that happened the last several days before we kind of dive into this. So we have, as we all know, the Bobby Brown III and Tershawn Wharton were on the PUP list. So the PUP list, they're on the active PUP list. That's something they can use during training camp. That'll count towards the 90-man roster, and they can return his practice as soon as possible. Bobby Brown, I believe he tweaked his hamstring while working out, and Tershawn Wharton, it's his neck. So they'll be on the PUP list. I'm not sure how long or not Bobby Brown will be out for, and when he'll be back in training camp. Tershawn Wharton, it's going to be a little bit longer than Bobby Brown, but they haven't given us any timetables as far as Dave Canales or anybody else. Now, the one that really stung was the one that we heard yesterday with Taylor Moton being sidelined. So you have JC Horn and Timo were placed on the reserve non-football injury list this week. JC Horn was mild. He got a cut while sprinting that required some stitches on the toe. They said he'll be out for a little while, but expected to return early during training camp. But that's just going to give a little bit more reps to Will Lee, our rookie, Corey Thornton, and Shaw Smith-Wade. But Timo's situation was unfortunate, and it's going to last a little bit longer. So Moton, he was diagnosed with blood clots in the lungs in late June. He was immediately placed on blood thinners, which is the treatment for when you have clots in the lung. Is you're put on blood thinners, which is about 3 months, a 3-month course, and then being assessed daily by the team's medical staff. So obviously the treatment will cause him to miss some regular season time, but he is expected to return this season. Typically with this, it can take 3 to 6 months to return to football. So it's going to be interesting to see. For me, one, this is just unfortunate, right? Like you have Ike Ekwonu that's out all this year. So, and then now you have Timo that's not going to start the beginning of the year as well. So both of Bryce Young's tackles that he had last year, two different players now. So, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's going to be interesting to see how everything shapes up. That's one of the things we'll kind of go over as far as what positions we're looking forward to in training camp. But this is unfortunate, but at least it's not a season-ending injury. But first and foremost, just praying for a full recovery. It could be life threatening. So obviously, if football isn't even close. Like, this is something we want to make sure that Taylor Moton is well before we even think about any football. So, but the good news is that Canales talked about him responding well to treatment, and hopefully he'll be out in the field soon. I did hear reports that he was out in the field today, but nothing crazy. So it sounds like everything's in a positive direction. But again, just want to, provide my thoughts and prayers, and hopefully he returns soon. But again, first and foremost is his health. Okay, so let's dive into it. Yes, today after we had the Timo news, which is horrible. Then you get this early in the morning. So I'm driving to work today, and going on Twitter, I'm seeing all these reports with like training camp, how it's going. I'm like, this is great. We're getting all these reports. Football season's back. And then literally 5 minutes later, I see an updated report that Nick Scorton had an apparent knee injury. He was down on the ground. Reports were saying that he was crying. Teammates went over. They had to bring a car out. And obviously, you're thinking season-ending injury, which that is what's happened. He tore his right ACL, so which is obviously a huge blow for our pass rush. But from what I heard, reports said that the field was wet. He was fully engaged during an with an offensive lineman during a block. Obviously, he was emotional on the practice field. Canales and every player went up and gave him a hug before they took him to the training room. But Scorton was somebody that I was really looking forward to see how he was going to play with Jalen Phillips specifically. I thought he was really coming into his own towards the back half of last year. He tied first as far as team sacks with 5. He had 47 tackles, 9 QB hits. I thought he played really well and was, again, really excited to see his development into the season with a really good edge rusher in Jalen Phillips. Now, how the edge room looks without Nick Scorton, you got Jalen Phillips. Now, certain players are going to have to step up. You have Pat Jones, who I think is a starter, but obviously he was going to be depth with Scorton there. And then you have Princey Umamilielen. He took a hiatus with social media because he wanted to improve his game, and he thought he should have had more snaps than he had last year. Well, this is your chance, Princey. You got your chance, and let's see if you can make the most of it, because it's going to be a lot of Pat Jones and Princely. You obviously Thomas Incoom as well, but don't expect the Panthers to go out and get a big name guy. You have Hassan Reddick out there. You have Yetur Gross-Matos. There's another player I'm missing that was out there as well. Jadeveon Clowney, who won't come. He didn't want to play here, guys, remember? So this is a huge blow to our edge room. But again, that's what depth is about. We have some decent depth players that have to step up. This is unfortunate. It is what it is, but it's not a season killer, right? It's not Bryce Young that's out, right? It's not T-Mac that's out. It's not Derek Brown that's out. It's not J.C. Horn that's out. And that means, I don't mean any disrespect to Nick Scorton when I say that, but I mean, I was frustrated. I was mad, not at Nick, but just at the situation. But, next man up. And injuries happen in the NFL, and that's why depth matters. So, again, praying for Nick. I mean, that's just a horrible way to start the training camp this year and start the season. But if anything, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now, because that's to give more reps and more time for Princely and Pat Jones to be ready for the season. So hoping for a speedy recovery, and we won't see him until a year from now. So Nick Scorton is unfortunately out for the season. Now, that also had people to kind of talk about turf. And from the reports that I hear, I believe on the practice field that they have, it is grass. So it was just wet out there. Accidents happen. So it wasn't turf. But a lot of people, like after the World Cup, a lot of players, George Kittle and a few other players, were talking about hashtag worth the cost, because a lot of NFL stadiums had real grass. They made it work. And players, I think it's like 92% of athletes prefer natural grass over turf, which makes sense. The NFL, I find it interesting, because I was like, why would the NFL not want to put in grass, real grass. I get that turf is easier, it's less expensive, but Tepper always talks about I'll do whatever I got to do to allow my team to have an edge. Well, if your team wants grass, why not? Like, if it costs you more money, and I get that it's, there's this debate where, high end grass fields were, I don't know. There's a lot of research out there, and the NFL really doesn't take in consideration. They say there's not any evidence that shows that there's more injuries with turf than there is grass, which we all know is BS. It's all BS. That's straight BS. They don't want to put the money in to do it. But also, I get with turf, we Dave Tepper hosts a lot of concerts and other things. But if you're willing and you say out loud when you first were our owner that you're willing to do whatever you got to do for players to be successful, why would you not do this? Who cares if it takes a little bit more money? Like, you guys have plenty of money. This industry, the NFL makes over $9 billion a year, and you can't. They talk about and they preach player safety, concussions and all that. But is it going to take another lawsuit of like turf? As far as them being able to prove that turf caused this injury versus grass, and then that becomes a lawsuit, then they eventually do it. Like, is it going to take something like that in order for them to change things? So I just find it ridiculous if you make billions of dollars a year that you can't provide something that pretty much majority of players want. So again, this wasn't something that where the Panthers were practicing on turf. It was real grass from what I heard and what reports I've read. But again, that I wanted to bring this up because this is something that since I've been gone, a lot of NFL players have been talking about this. Okay, so all right, let's start getting into training camp. Let me try something. Oh, that's weird. Let's just do this. Okay, and then there we go. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the quarterback position. So obviously, we know that Bryce Young is the starter, right? He's obviously entering a critical season while playing on the fifth-year option. He played well, obviously, back half of last year, and this is something. Again, this isn't a knock on Bryce Young, but it's just the truth. He also did well the back half of the year before that, where he played really well, and then we had high expectations. Then he started off slow, where they played against the Cardinals and we got beat by the Patriots, and it took several games for them to start to get their feet wet and get into get ready for football. So with that said, hopefully with preseason coming up, and Dave Canales did mention it during his press conference, that game reps matter. You can do the practice, you can do the joint practices. Yes, those are great, but there's something different. And he mentioned it during the press conference today. There's something different with the lights on, the crowd there. There's a different energy, which we all know that. But I think he's kind of learned from his mistakes the last couple of years that, and he even cited there's evidence where if you get players to play a little bit more early on, there's actually less likely of injury. So it does sound like that he's going to want all the starters, maybe some starters more or less. Some starters playing a little bit more, some a little less. But overall, he does want them to get a little bit more reps in actual games. So I think this is great. And I think that's something that him and Dan Morgan probably talked about this offseason and just kind of reflected on how the year could have improved last year. In the last couple of years, that we have started slow, which we can't afford to do this year. So again, Bryce Young, I thought he did really well as far as his improvement with field passing accuracy, but the lack of down the field throws did affect him last year. Now, a part of that is obviously play calling, but another part of it was he unwilling to do that at the beginning of the year, and then he started to feel a little bit more confident. But he plays well when the offense is spread out and he can read defenses pre-snap. The games where he got the green light and he was able to throw down the field, we won. When he didn't have the green light, we lost. So I believe it was I don't know if it was a Thursday or Monday night game against the 49ers. We played so conservatively. We ran the ball a lot. And, I felt like and the defense had a couple interceptions and we couldn't capitalize. Then you have the games like the Rams where they're like, hey, go throw the ball. We're got to score a lot of points, and they gave him the green light, and he played amazing for both in the regular season and the playoffs. So I do think it's gonna be interesting to see how Brad Idzik does as a play caller. But again, Bryce Young did really well last year. He had a career high as far as passing yards, touchdowns, completion percentage. But he did have a 13.5% pressure to sack rate, which is you got to protect Bryce Young. That's not good. Obviously, you had Robert Hunt that was out last year after week 2 with a bicep tear. Then you had Brady Christensen week 8 with Achilles tear. So there's a lot of injuries on the offensive line. But as far as quarterback battles, I don't think quarterback 2 is a battle at all either. I don't think there is one. Kenny Pickett, I think, in my opinion, is a lock at QB2. Haynes King could possibly fight for that final roster spot, but I really honestly see him making it to the practice squad unless he contributes to special teams and they give him the 53 man spot. So he's going to get a lot of reps this preseason, in my opinion, definitely on the Hall of Fame game. So he's a guy that he's mobile, he's quick, he's very athletic. He's still raw as a passer, but he does offer that mobility, and he has developmental upside that he could eventually be QB2. So again, should receive plenty of reps throughout camp and throughout the preseason. Okay. The center battle. Man. Let me hit reload. StreamYard has been interesting. Let me see. Sorry. Okay. There we go. That's so weird. StreamYard has been really weird today. Okay. So center. Center is one position I want to talk about. So you have Luke Fortner, Sam Hecht, and Nick Samick. So the Panthers have a very interesting battle brewing at center, in my opinion. So Luke Fortner enters camp as the experienced vet. But you have the 5th round rookie Sam Hecht, who's already generating buzz, in my opinion, this offseason so far, who I think who was a steal for this year's draft. And then you have Nick Samick, a returning player from last season, who also have a chance to compete throughout camp. So with Luke Fortner, I think his versatility could actually work against him because Carolina may value him more as a backup who can play multiple spots versus just center. And Sam Hecht is just strictly a true center prospect. I do think, obviously, the Panthers need stability in the middle of the offensive line. But Sam Hecht, to me, is obviously the higher long-term upside player. Fortner's experience gives him the early advantage, I think, for now. But we'll see how things generate throughout camp and see if that changes. I think Samick is more of a dark horse in the competition, but ultimately I do think this is Sam's job to lose. So I think Luke Fortner is center 1 right now, but I think that will change, in my opinion. It may not be at the beginning of the season, but definitely before the season ends, I think you'll see Sam Hecht as the starter. But I do think this is Sam Hecht's job. That's the center battle that I want to keep an eye on, and everyone else should keep an eye on throughout camp. And then this isn't really a battle, but just the position group in general. So you have Chuba Hubbard, obviously at RB1, Jonathan Brooks at RB2. So Jonathan Brooks obviously is finally healthy after recovering from his ACL injury and could become a major weapon if he regains his explosiveness, which all reports have been that are indicating that he has. And even today during Dave Canales' press conference, he said that he saw the guy that he drafted in Texas. So I'm excited about Jonathan Brooks. He could definitely be our breakout player this year. Again, if he can stay healthy this season, he will add an element to this offense that Bryce Young hasn't had his whole career. So I'm really rooting for Brooks. You obviously have Trevor Etienne that should continue to contribute on special teams while earning some touches. I do think they will add they did obviously add competition with A.J. Dillon. Dillon is someone that I would say to watch. I do think ultimately it will be Hubbard, Brooks, and Etienne as RB1, 2, and 3. But I don't sleep on A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon brings a different element to the running game. He's more of a physical power running player. I do think he is more of like a bruising style type of running back that Canales wants in the running back room as far as like what they want to identify as. and he would be highly beneficial, obviously, in short yardage situations, goal line situations. But ultimately, with RB3, I do think, again, Trevor Etienne will take the spot because you got to be able to contribute to special teams. And obviously, A.J. Dillon isn't a special team running back. So I do think he'll ultimately fall to the practice squad. And you'll have Chuba, Brooks, and Trevor Etienne when it's all said and done during the 53-man roster. Okay, so then you have left and right tackle. Again, I had pictures here, and they're gone. I think it's just weird not to have the, let's see. There we go. So weird. Okay. So obviously, with the injury, before the announcement of Timo being sidelined, this was going to be one of the biggest storylines, in my opinion, heading into camp at left tackle. Rasheed Walker versus Monroe Freeling. And so before this happened, I really thought, obviously, you have Timo at right tackle, right guard, Robert Hunt, center, Luke Fortner or Sam Heck, and then you have Damian Lewis. And then I really thought that Monroe Freeling was going to be left tackle too, but he'll have to prove it and earn it in camp, which I think he ultimately would have. And even Dave Canales mentioned that to us before. Earlier this week, he mentioned that they had conversations. They're like, hey, you have to go out and earn it. Now, with Timo being out, hey, we need you. We need you at right tackle. So Dan Morgan and Dave Canales mentioned that Rasheed Walker will be at left tackle, Monroe Freeling at right tackle. Now, this makes Dan Morgan look really smart. Yeah, you signed Rasheed Walker, who was pretty stable at left tackle for the Packers last year. So you signed a really good quality left tackle for a 1 year, $4 million deal, which is a steal. He obviously brings a lot of NFL experience. He's going to provide some stability there. So it'll be interesting to see how Freeling settles in at right tackle. So I don't think this is ideal for a rookie. And I'll kind of go over the situation here in my head, what I'm thinking as far as, obviously he's going to start at right tackle. And with the rookie, you really want them, and Dave Canales has mentioned this a year ago, you don't want a rookie to go from one place to another, right? Because they're not really settling in and honing on one position. Now, Monroe Freeling has the versatility to go left or right. He's played just under 300 snaps at Georgia, but he primarily plays left tackle. And this is somebody that we drafted to be our left tackle, not to be our right tackle, to be our left tackle. Now, it has been done where we had Jordan Gross play right tackle the whole year, but that's the key that I want people to think about. He played the whole year there. What happens when Timo comes back? Timo's solid. He's probably going to get the right tackle position back. So what's going to happen with Monroe Freeling? Do you want him to go to left tackle now? Or does he have to kind of earn it in practice and take over Rasheed Walker's spot? Or do you just let him practice and, kind of have him as depth, for the year and then really have him hone in on left tackle during next season? So that's the thing, is where he's obviously someone that has a lot of high upside. He was still kind of raw. He still is a little raw, right? But this isn't ideal. Now, I feel comfortable with him at right tackle. And Dan Morgan mentioned this, he's going to have some ups and downs, right? It's not going to be like, hey, he's a true right tackle, he's going to hone in that spot and just dominate. I do think he's going to play well, but I also think he's going to have some rookie growing pains as well, to be honest. But the fact with Timo being out, who knows how many games, at least 4, probably more than that. But what happens when Timo comes back? What if Monroe Freeling is really settling at right tackle? Do you just leave Timo there? I don't think so. I don't know. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. I really am. But this is a big storyline I'm keeping up with, not to see who's going to play what position, but how are they playing at that position, right? How is Monroe Freeling doing against Pat Jones and Princely and those guys and Jalen Phillips? How's he doing with, Derek Brown or Lee Hunter and those guys? So that's something I'm interested to see going into camp. Now, another thing I'm really interested to see that's generating a lot of buzz is the wide receiver depth. Again, man, this I I don't know why StreamYard is doing this. Or Canva. Sorry, Canva. Um, hmm. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it alone. Okay, so wide receiver depth. Um, so obviously Xavier Legette, and to me, and everybody knows he's entering a make or break season. Uh, he's had some improved chemistry with Bryce Young, and one of the biggest storylines this offseason has been Xavier Legette commitment to building chemistry with Bryce Young. Uh, this I think it was earlier this season, Cam Newton gave him some advice on his podcast, like, "Hey, you gotta have a relationship with your quarterback." So Bryce was it Bryce attended like one of a trail event that Xavier Legette had, and so they've been doing some things together this off season. But those are the things that you want. You want those off the field connections, and that's something that Xavier Legette wasn't really doing last year. We saw Jalen Coker do those things, but not excel. And you look at Coker's development, so a little bit of a different mindset this offseason. But again, Legette knows this is a huge year. He has openly admitted, I can't have another year like I did last year. Uh, this is a do or die. He's according to reports, he has this do or die mentality, and it's true. Like he's got it. He's got to play better than he did last year, and he's got to stay healthy, which he's made a big, huge priority for. So you have the hamstring injuries that slowed him down the first couple of years. So he's worked closely with the performance staff to create kind of a bulletproof plan for his hamstrings. He's dropped about 10 pounds to help reduce some stress on the lower body, and also to improve his explosiveness. So if he can stay healthy, that's a huge step forward. But to me, talent hasn't really been the question for me. It's been the issue's been consistency, the mental mistakes, and just building time with Bryce. That's the position that I'm looking to see is wide receiver 3. Who's going to take over that position? You got John Mechie that has connections with Bryce in Alabama. You got Chris Brazzell that's already made some big catches over Mike Jackson, even though Mike Jackson kind of carried him out of bounds. But, this is that's a win for us. Even if Chris Brazzell does well, John Mechie does well, and Xavier Legette does well, like that builds iron sharpens iron. And I'm excited to see if XL can really take a big step this off season during this training camp. I still wouldn't rule it out. If there are some wide receiver needy teams that a trade could happen, I do think that's a possibility. But this is one of the main position battles that I'm looking for is that wide receiver depth there. Who's going to get wide receiver 3, 4, and 5? I think a part of that's obviously how they do during camp, and even the later. I think we traditionally take 7 wide receivers, and when you're wide receiver 6, 7, you gotta contribute to special teams. You have to. So that's why I think Jimmy Horn could be the odd man out. Can he contribute to special teams? Who's going to make those final wide receiver spots? Again, Jimmy Horn, can he get that? John Mechie, but I think Jimmy Horn could be the odd man out. Again, if he cannot contribute to special teams and he's not really progressing, that's something I'm interested to keep an eye on during training camp and see, how's he playing? How's he practicing? Now, another thing that I want to keep an eye on is the tight end room. Will this be a tight end by committee year, or will someone emerge as the true tight end 1? You obviously have Tommy Trimble, JT Sanders, Mitchell Evans, Felipe Franks that we required from Atlanta, and James Mitchell. And I'm really curious to see, again, with Brad Idzik being the play caller, will that tight end target share increase at all? Tommy Trimble and James Mitchell both played every single game last year. Tommy had the most receptions, the most receiving yards at 250. He averaged 9.2 yards per reception, a couple touchdowns. Mitchell Evans had 171 yards, 9 yards per reception, and a touchdown. And JT Sanders had 190 yards receiving and only averaged 6.6 yards. I had a little bit more target share than Mitchell Evans, but I'm interested to see, will someone step up? Mitchell Evans, I think it was solid, and I think he'll keep improving. They like him, passing, and they like him as a blocking tight end as well. And him and JT Sanders share pretty much exactly the same offensive snap, total offensive snaps. So let's see if there's a player that will emerge during training camp. And I do think this is possible. This is possible that JT Sanders could be his last year if he doesn't get back to the way he was playing his rookie year. Because we saw his rookie year before his neck injury, and neck injuries can linger. But before his neck injury, we saw him play very well. And then after the neck injury, even when he came back, he just wasn't the same. So it's going to be interesting to see, can he step up? Because, last year during training camp, it was all about, hey, he's more explosive. He looks like a wide receiver versus a tight end, but nothing really came of it. So this is a year that I feel like is pivotal for JT Sanders if he's going to continue playing for the Panthers after this year. Now, one of the other biggest things I'm excited to see this year is who's going to take the nickel position. So earlier this year during OTAs, Dave Canales mentioned that Corey Thornton initially won the job. He made it clear that so Dave Canales has made it clear the nickel corner job is completely open. Shaw Smith-Way that handled most of the role last year, but obviously Corey Thornton began taking it over before his season-ending injury. The Panthers added the fourth-round pick Will Lee. They have Devontae Smith, the undrafted rookie. That brings a lot of slot experience from Alabama and Notre Dame. But what makes this interesting is each player brings something a little different. You have Shaw Smith-Way that obviously has the experience. Now, I'm not a fan of Shaw Smith-Wade. I feel like we can do better than that. I thought Corey Thornton did do better than that last year. Thornton, he has more size, more length. Will Lee has upside as a rookie. Devontae Smith, I think, could surprise people with his slot coverage ability, but this may be one of the most competitive battles on the roster. Carolina obviously appears to let the best player win regardless of when was the person drafted or not. You got a fourth-round pick and a bunch of undrafted free agents. Obviously, nickel corner is increasingly getting more important in today's NFL because defenses spend so much more time in sub packages. So, again, I do think this is going to be Corey Thornton's job at the end of the day. I do think he'll take over this job. Again, he won it until he got injured last year, and I think he will take it over this year. But this is just another position that I think Panther fans need to pay attention to. And then the last position I want to talk about is safety. So I know a lot of people are not a fan of Nick Scott. You have Lathan Ransom, Nick Scott. You got Zakee Wheatley that we picked up in the 5th round. But with Lathan Ransom, I think he can step up. It's going to be interesting to see, can he step up and take over that position? He had compared Nick Scott, I think, pretty much played every single snap on the defense last year. But when you compare Lathan Ransom's stats to Nick Scott, the playmaking ability, when comparing total snaps, Ransom was far more disruptive per snap basis. Coverage is still a concern, but coverage is also a concern for Nick Scott. That's something I feel like, Evero wants to make sure that Lathan improves upon is the coverage. That's something that we saw that safety position really not do well last year, was giving up a lot of busted coverages. But when Lathan Ransom was on the field, he made an impact on the field. He had a sack, a pick, 2 passes defended, a forced fumble. So he was all over the place. And pretty much Nick Scott had the same exact stats, but more than triple the amount of snaps. So I do think Nick Scott's PFF coverage grade was a little bit higher than Lathan Ransom, but if Lathan Ransom can improve at that category as far as coverage goes, I think he could take over that position. But obviously right now it's Nick Scott's job right now. He's safety 1. He's the free safety, but it'll be interesting to see if Lathan Ransom can take that over. Now, obviously, we have Zakee Wheatley that we picked up in the 5th round that you see on the right there. I think he's going to compete more for like depth special teams. He does have the ideal size at 6'3", 200 pounds. He does have good on-ball production. He's versatile in zone coverage, but he's someone that I think will just be a special teams guy for now. And then outside of that, you have Demani Richardson and Isaiah Simmons. So those are the guys, and those are the position groups that I'm excited about this training camp. And we'll kind of go in more in depth. We'll kind of go over the 53-man roster in later videos. But those are the position groups that I wanted to talk about and discuss with you guys that I'm really excited about kind of diving into as training camp progresses. Now, hopefully I should be able to produce a lot more content more regularly, at least once a week. If things pop up, big news or something like that, I'll try to get on. But again, the reason why I had that big gap in content was the move. So looking forward to, more live streams, more videos, engaging with you guys and all that. But with that said, let me know which position battles you are watching the closest. Let me know your breakout candidates and your bold predictions in the comments. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be back, and hopefully no more injuries. No more injuries. Come on. Just Panthers, let's take it easy. That's enough news for 2 days. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Keep pounding. Peace.